The forests in western Oregon are a recipe for disaster. With a lack of management due to outdated regulations and special interest lawsuits, timber harvest has nearly come to a halt. As a result, county tax revenue from logging has plummeted in recent years. People are out of work. Public services, such as police, fire, and school funding, have been severely cut back. For hunters, there is a lack of big game. Forest tree canopies have grown so thick, due to a lack of harvest, that nothing grows beneath. In search of forage, game animals move to greener pastures, where often we don't have access to hunt and fish. Wildfires are increasingly frequent in these thick forests and burning up our resources. That in turn leads to erosion of our streams and rivers, and our fishing grounds. Under the status quo, nobody is winning. We're all losing. We need a modern timber management plan.
Beyond this sign is O&C Lands, and nothing's happening. We're stuck on center. We need our Congress to get moving on this for Oregon. My sons, I have 5 boys, and we're all avid outdoorsmen. We love to hunt and fish. And it's been 15 plus years since we've been effectively able to hunt on national forest lands in western Oregon. These lands have not been properly managed in a lot of respects with regard to timber harvest, and as a result our deer and elk populations have suffered tremendously. Unless you have access to the timberland owned by private timber companies, you really don't get an opportunity to hunt deer and elk much in any of these lands. This is a cut from probably back in 2010, I would guess, and then in the background you can see this stand that was left. And in these types of situations, it's ideal habitat for deer and elk. These variable retention stands that the O&C Lands prescribe for these areas. So deer and elk have the habitat that they can make use of in these stands of trees, but then be able to come out into these areas and feed. There'll be forage, all kinds of good feed for deer, elk. So all of this open area here that's already starting to green up at the beginning of February, by April and May is going to be full of green, and lots and lots of feed there for bears. Bears are just going to love feeding out through this unit this spring. This will be a really good area that we'll spend a lot of time hunting spring bear in here.
I see the forest burning. The overstocking of our forests right now, or lack of management of our forests, have created a large overstock. And as things are drying out, things are becoming warmer, we're seeing larger, more severe catastrophic fires. As those fires come through and take a watershed, all of a sudden we see the erosion from the watershed and the stream sediment sitting in. And the people, or the actual losers here, the spawning beds for the fish. And as an avid angler myself, I've lost some of those wonderful holes that I used to visit over the years that used to produce wonderful fish. Aren't there anymore because of erosion and sediment.
The buildup of the fuels level has put our communities not only at fiscal potential liability, but catastrophic wildfires becoming a norm. So we have a huge tourism industry in Josephine County, and I can remember in recent summer that we had to shut down the main artery of the Rogue River for 8 days to river rafting, and they were doing the math and saying that the fiscal impact had somewhere around $100,000 a day for the rafting companies with canceled reservations to raft the lower Rogue and upper Rogue.
I've seen this slide go on now since the 90s. When I first got involved in my career working for city government in the Willamette Valley, timber revenue was still going, but it's dropped off precipitously over the years because of the lockup with lawsuits and so on. And now we're at a point where the counties just are on a shoestring.
If we don't unlock the logjam, what's going to happen is people in Southern Oregon are still going to continue to be raped, and we're not going to be able to have law enforcement showing up on the door.
I am extremely frustrated. I'm not expecting anything to go back to the way things were in the 70s and 80s. We can agree that probably wasn't the right timber management program. But what we're doing right now isn't either. And there's some middle ground if people can find it. And I think we're moving towards that. The time to act was 10 years ago, but the best time to act, the second best time to act, is today.
Our lands are deteriorating. These public lands that we hunt and fish on are deteriorating. The clock is ticking on this, and it's time for Congress to stop bickering, to stop listening to the special interest groups, and sit down and hammer out a solution to this.
So O&C timberlands, they need to be managed. We know how. We need a law that allows that to happen.
So I think what needs to happen now is really come together and understand that this the opinion of people saying we can't communicate or I'm not going to move on my position has to stop, because what they're protecting is actually being destroyed.